So welcome to the final part of the Hodgepodge Blanket crochet along. I am so excited that we're finally getting to join all of these beautiful granny squares. I really hope you've enjoyed this crochet along so far, and if you've missed any of the crocheted squares so far, don't forget that you can find the list in the description box below, or the link to take you to the list of all of the 30 different squares in the description box below, and they're also in a playlist on my channel too. If you haven't already, of course, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so that you never miss out on another one of my free crochet patterns again, or any one of my tutorials either. One of the first things we're going to need to do before we even consider joining our squares is laying them out in the order that we want to join them. Within the Hodgepodge Blanket pattern bundle, there is a template there for you to create your own layout of your squares. I'm going to lay mine out on my dining table, which is why we're in this room today, so that we can get the colour match that we want, if we want to have them all the multicoloured ones in one row, or you want to mix them all together. Now obviously this is a hodgepodge blanket, so it's entirely up to you which order you put them in. If you want to follow along with how I'm joining mine, you will find all the details over on my website as well as to the layout that I've chosen, with the stitch names and the days that they were released as well. Now the way that we're going to join these squares is in some respects very simple. Once we have it laid out, we're going to work down all the horizontal rows. So I'm going to be laying my blanket out in 5 squares across, 6 squares down, and that will give us that 40" by 48" size. And we're simply going to work down each of those rows, and then we're going to work back across the horizontals to make sure that everything's joined. And then finally, we're going to add a border. So the border video will be available tomorrow and a separate video, so you've got all day to get joining these squares, because the most difficult part is probably going to be laying them out. Let's think about the materials we're going to need to join our blanket, because I've decided to choose a 5th colour. So it's going to be a contrast to all of the squares that I've made. I'm still using the same type of yarn, so it's still 100% acrylic. And of course I'm using my PaintBox Yarns Simply Aran. This is a size 4 yarn, so I'm going to use a corresponding hook size of a 5mm. And when you're using a contrasting colour than your blanket, it's going to make your border stand out a little bit more against your squares. So gather all of your materials, gather all of your squares, and let's get them laid out ready to join. So as you can see, I've got all of my squares laid out. This is the order that I'm going to be joining my squares in. And yes, this is a 6-seater dining table, and yes, it has absolutely covered it. I'm really happy with the order that I've chosen, with a couple of the doubled colours. They are next to each other, but the joy of having a contrasting colour for the join means that there's going to be grey in between each and every square. So once you're happy with your layout, we can get started on our joining. So I've changed position so you can see exactly what I'm doing, and I've stacked up my other 3 rows so that I can just focus on these 2 rows to join them. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on 2 squares at a time, and we're going to work in these horizontal lines. So we're going to join down here, then we're going to add on these next 2 squares. There are lots of different ways that you can join your blanket. Now I'm going to be using a Zig Zag slip stitch join. This is a stunning join that creates the most wonderful braided look all the way down. But because it's a slip stitch, it's nice and flat, and it just means that it will keep your squares lying flat as well. So I've got my 5mm crochet hook, and I've got my yarn, and we're going to start by kind of butting these 2 squares up together so we've got both the right sides facing, to join them first of all. And we're going to join them in that stitch right after either where you've joined or where you did your last chain 1. So we're kind of joining in the corner, and then we want to find the same stitch on this square here. So there's the chain 1. I've got the wrong side butting up against this wrong side. I'm just going to pop my hook through, and then with my contrast yarn, I'm just pulling through, and I'm going to do a little chain 1 with my working yarn, I can pick it up just to join them. So with this zigzag join, we're going to be working through the right side of both of these squares. If you chose to do any other join, just carry on in the same format, but work in those horizontal rows. What we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook back into the first square that we joined and just do our first slip stitch. So we yarn over, bring the yarn back through and straight through the loop on our hook. And then we move, I'm going to pop that under there so we don't get confused. This is our working yarn. I'm just moving that out of the way and I'm going to insert my hook through from the right side. So instead of going underneath, I'm kind of working on this side and I'm going to insert my hook again through that same stitch you've already worked through. Try and catch both those loops. It's a little bit fiddly doing this first one and then it gets easier, I promise. Move that tail out of the way. So we're just inserting where we did that first join and then we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook as we would normally and work another slip stitch. So once we've done that first one, I'm just going to tighten that tail yarn so that everything's nice and tight and then we're ready to carry on with our joining. So we've already gone through this stitch here, so we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, bring it back through and do the next slip stitch and then we're going in on from the right side of the next square through from the right side, yarning over the hook and bring it back through. And we just continue that all the way down. So through the right side and then through the right side of the next square, yarning over the hook and pulling it through and continue to work through each stitch all the way down. So it works up nice and quickly, this joining. I'll do a few more and then I'll show you just how beautiful it looks. I'm a huge fan of this join. I mean, I love my single crochet join just for the pure simplicity. Sorry, my dog's tippy-toeing around for some unknown reason. She's usually asleep in the corner, but today she's up and about. Let's do one more and then I'll have a look to see how we're turning out. If I lay that flat, you can see that absolutely stunning braided look of these stitches, these kind of slip stitches working through both right sides of here. So continue to work all the way down to the end of this square here and I'll meet you here ready to join on the next two squares. I'll do a few more with you just so that you're happy and I'm happy that you've got it. So we're inserting from the right side of the first square, yarning over and slip stitching, so pulling straight through, and then I'm moving the yarn out of the way, inserting it into the next stitch of the next square. So if it was laid flat, I'd be inserting from here, yarning over and pulling through. And we're just going to repeat that all the way down the square and I'll meet you at the end of this square join. So now that we've completed our first zigzag join all the way through our first two squares, we're ready to continue and add on the next two squares in our row. Got them all lined up here, ready to work. So to do this, what we do is once we've reached this corner of both of these squares, we do a chain one, and then we're going to add on this square by finding that corner space and inserting our hook through the right side and completing our zigzag slip stitch as normal. We're then going to work onto the next square, again working into that corner space, completing our slip stitch as normal, going through the right side and slip stitching. Now what that's done, if I move my hook out of the way, is it's joined all of these squares together. Because we're going to come back along this way, when we come back the other way, we're going to join this square to that square to make it super secure and to complete our joins. So what we've done is we've zigzagged from this square all the way over to this square, going through the right side, and then we're just going to continue to zigzag all the way down. And we're going to repeat that process when we join the next two squares. So always join from this side into the opposite square, and then continue to zigzag all the way down. So continue to add all of the 6 pairs of squares all the way down to the end here, and then you can fasten off. And I'm going to meet you to join our next row of squares on. So all of these 12 are going to be joined to each other, and then we're going to repeat the whole process, joining the 3rd row onto our 2nd row. So continue working all the way down, working from this square into the next square when you're ready to join the next one with a chain 1, and then slip stitching in from the right side on the opposite square. And I'll meet you for the next part. So I've just finished adding my first row of squares all together. I'm just going to fold them over so they don't fall off the table. I've done a little chain 1 to fasten off, and I've made sure, actually it looks like I need to do one more back into the other side. Just making sure that I've reached the equal parts. There we go, that looks a bit better, so that we have a nice flat seam there. Going to do a little chain 1 and then leave quite a bit so that we can weave in later on, and just snip and use my hook to pull through to create a little knot. So this is the first part of my blanket all joined. Now if you get a bit twisted, just make sure that these chains in between aren't twisted up, because once we've got to this point, I have gathered my next pile of squares, and I'm going to grab that top one because that's going next to this one here. And just as we started this side, we're going to start by joining these two together with a slip stitch. So I'm going to go through the right side of this square, finding that corner stitch and inserting my hook. Forgot to add my other square on. And I'm just going to again find that chain 1, insert my hook into that next stitch, making sure that the edges meet up. I'm just going to make a little, just join the yarn with a chain 1 by slip stitching through both sides. And then we are ready to start. I'll turn this way this time. Our zigzag again, remembering that when we do this first section or the first join, we're going to slip stitch back into the stitch we've just joined into first and foremost. And then we can start working through the right side. Again, we've got this fiddly one where we've just done that first join, just to make it all extra tight and secure. And then we are ready just to carry on doing our, oh, I can do it so easy off camera, doing our zigzag join all the way down, adding each square as we go. So that's how you add on your next row of squares. So continue to work all the way down, joining, making sure that you're not twisted at any point on this side here. Remember, we're joining from here onto this square and then continuing down, and work that the whole way down, adding your next row, and then you can add in the last 2 rows as well. And I'm going to meet you back to work our first horizontal so that we can work over this join here and make a really tight finish. And then we're going to be ready to add our border on. So keep working all your rows on, and I'll meet you back for the horizontal. So now that we've joined all of our long length joins all the way down, we're going to come back to fill in these spaces in between. Just going to turn my blanket around a little bit, and we're going to do it exactly the way we did for the horizontals, but this time we're going to work over this middle way, going from this square into this square. So just like we did before, we're going to butt our squares up together, finding that corner space, that corner stitch, and joining those just with a little slip stitch join or a chain 1 join, just so we can get ourselves started, just as we did with all the other rows. So we work our first slip stitch. Sorry, we still have the dog running around because she's in a funny one today, and then work back through the other one, and then we're ready to continue to work all the way down. So work your first zigzag slip stitch join all the way down. I'm sure you're an absolute pro at this now by the time you've worked all these long lengths, joining all those squares together. So work down, and I'll meet you ready to join from this square to this one, working over that chain 1 we have. So to get over from this square over to this one, we're pretty much going to do the same thing as before. So we're going to work our last, I've got one more stitch to do in the corner of this square here. I'm not going to go around that chain 1 just yet. I'm going to complete my slip stitch, and instead of doing a chain 1, we're going to slip stitch over the chain 1, and then we go straight into the next square or directly opposite. So I'm going from this side to this side. When we worked these horizontal lines, we went from left over to the right, and this time we're going right over to the left, and that will close that gap over the corner. And we're going to do that all the way down this square, because then we can just continue to work our slip stitches, make sure that's about similar size, all the way down to the next join, and we're just going to repeat that the whole way down. So when we get to, let's move to the next one. So if you imagine we're worked all the way down this square, we finish on the last corner here, and we're working to join this square. So we work our last corner, not underneath that. We then slip stitch around that chain 1, and then we continue down into the next square. And just like we did for all the different horizontals, we're going to repeat joining, working across those joins there. You can see how secure that join is. If I get to the center of the camera, it's in a different place to normal. You can see just how secure that closing is. If we flip it over to the other side, you can see just how neat that looks on the other side as well. So we're going to repeat that for all of the horizontals, all of the verticals. In this case, we're working back down the other way and getting all of these joined. So once you've done all of those joins, there's going to be another video, which is going to be available tomorrow, for the actual border itself to go the whole way around the edging of the blanket so that we can complete this. But I think you'll agree, now that I've got both sides on this square here, how lovely that contrasting colour looks between. And because it hasn't been used in any of the squares, even though it's such a light colour, it does look nice and bold, even up against these multicoloured squares here. I just love this zigzag finish. It really is absolutely stunning. So make sure that you're ready to get all of your joins finished as quickly as possible. Don't let this one drag on. It's so tempting to just say, oh, I'll just do one row today. Once you get into the swing of it, get it all done, get it finished, because then we can add our border on and we'll have our completed blanket. And that's got to be a bit exciting, hasn't it? So as always, thank you for joining me. I will see you again tomorrow for our border video so that we can get our blankets finished off. And of course, I'll be giving you all the details of how to enter the big giveaway. Don't worry, you've got a good little while to enter that competition, because I'm going to want to see your finished blankets. So get that joining done, and I'll see you again for another video. Until then, keep it cozy.